It's a great pleasure to be here at the Carter Center. This is my first visit to Atlanta in my present job, not my first overall. When I served in the United States for the first time in the embassy in the 1980s, the Carter Center was in its early days. But obviously, as I speak to you today, it's just celebrated its 25th anniversary, and there are very few institutions in the world which have this institution's reputation in the areas of human rights and global health. And that's a tribute to all of you who work and study here, but particularly, of course, to President and Mrs. Carter. So thank you to the Carter Center for the invitation, to the Haller Institute for Global Learning at Emory for their support for this occasion as well, and for all of you for coming along. Now, I want to go on to the Middle East. The peace process in the Middle East is closely associated with this center and with President Carter personally. And I imagine that I'll be preaching to the converted in saying that leaving the Arab-Israel conflict unresolved has consequences going far beyond the borders that the Israeli and Palestinian negotiating teams are now trying to draw. So in addition to leaving us with a sense of powerlessness, this failure to reach a conclusion on this issue serves regrettably as a recruiting tool for those who see a different future from the Middle East, from the one that we and moderate forces throughout the region are trying to build. The truth is that although the Palestinian issue did not bring Al-Qaeda and Islamic fundamentalism into being, nevertheless, its resolution would, more than any other single achievement, help us to defeat the extremists' narrative and restore confidence in the effectiveness of international activity. And a solution would reduce anti-Western sentiment and the sense of grievance that hampers our work on counter-terrorism and counter-radicalization. Now, it's troubling that 60 years after its creation, the State of Israel still does not enjoy the security that it deserves. My country is unapologetically a staunch friend of Israel. We understand Israeli preoccupations and aspirations. But as many have argued, Israel's security can only be realized when the Palestinians' own legitimate aspirations for statehood are met in their turn. So the UK and the European Union are going to uphold that goal, and we support the current efforts of the parties, assisted and supported by the US administration, to reach a settlement. We'll do all we can, bilaterally and in the EU, to support them and to reinforce the momentum which has been generated by the Annapolis and Paris conferences. We've got a very simple three-part approach. First, to support a two-state solution. Second, to support those who are committed to that peaceful progress in the region as a whole. And third, to promote economic and social development across the Palestinian territories. Bilaterally, we're focusing in a certain number of areas, particularly building up Palestinian institutions in support of Tony Blair's mandate as the representative of the Quartet, the international community, and ensuring a step change in financial support to the Palestinians. Security sector reform is a key area where we believe the UK has a particular expertise. We've committed personnel and financial support to this process. President Abbas and Prime Minister Fayyad are committed to it, and the aim is to develop Palestinian capacity to govern themselves, which will in turn persuade the Israelis that they're serious about tackling security and implementing their roadmap commitments. The recent deployment of a brigade of Palestinian security forces to Jenin, with another brigade about to deploy to a second town on the West Bank, is a sign that things are starting to change on the ground. Another sign of progress is on economic development. Working closely with the Israeli Defense Minister Barak and with Prime Minister Fayyad, Tony Blair has put together a package to allow Palestinian economic and commercial development. And obviously, it's important for the Palestinian authorities to show their people that a commitment to peace brings benefits. For the work of the Palestinian Authority to bear fruit, Palestinians need to be given the freedom to work and to benefit from commerce. And that's where the security work of the 3 US generals, Dayton, Fraser and Jones, is invaluable. And we have welcomed the recent statement by the Israeli Defense Minister that there'll be improved movement and access inside the West Bank by removing a number of West Bank roadblocks and easing restrictions at others. And it's very important those commitments are translated into real progress. We recently sponsored a major investment conference in Bethlehem with over 1,000 business leaders from across the Middle East, this country and Europe, pledging our support to the Palestinian economy and fledgling businesses. That generated over 200 projects worth up to $2 billion. They've been put forward and they will, if implemented, create badly needed jobs and infrastructure. All the funds that we've put forward are a key component in our effort to support the peace process. We have provided already $110 million this year of the $500 million which Gordon Brown promised over the next 3 years for the peace process. That's a very substantial investment by my country alone. We believe that this is necessary to underpin the political process and help security. Now, I want to say a few words about Gaza, both the humanitarian and the political aspects. We're concerned by the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, which is why we, along with others, notably in this country, have provided significant amounts of financial support to the relief agencies working there. We've also pressed Israel at the political level to respect the humanitarian needs of those caught up in this tragedy. We welcome Israeli decisions to allow fuel and supplies into Gaza, which is not, despite reports suggesting otherwise, being subjected to a total international blockade. Now, I know there are calls for the international community to have direct contact with Hamas, but contact of itself doesn't really seem to be the problem. Hamas have been at talks with their Fatah opposite numbers, brokered by the Saudis and by Yemen for some time. Other Arab governments are constantly in touch with them. The Egyptian government have been involved in intensive efforts with Hamas to arrange a ceasefire and the return of the Israeli soldier Hamas continue to hold captive. So the problem looks to be less a problem simply of contact, rather a lack of willingness to work with others to resolve the conflict. And contact for contact's sake seems unlikely to change the equation. What will change it is a move from Hamas's politicians. The international community has been clear that if Hamas respects the 3 R's, that is, renunciation of violence, recognition of Israel, respect for previous negotiations and agreements, if they do that, we will respond and we're ready for a normal relationship. In any case, we have regular contact with President Abbas, who was elected by the whole Palestinian population, has appointed his government and is the chief negotiator with Israel. No one in the international community wants to undermine him and his prime minister. Now, I mentioned the efforts by the regional partners to help with the establishment of Palestinian unity and a ceasefire with Israel. And that prompts me to say that the region has a huge role to play more broadly to help resolve this conflict. So we in the UK have welcomed the Arab Peace Initiative, the work of the Arab League in working towards a normalization of relations between Israel and Israel's Arab neighbors. The direct Israeli-Syrian talks and the accord reached last week in Doha, which brokered a resolution of the Lebanese internal political conflict, those are, in our view, positive developments. Now, we all know that because of history, both sides are fearful of the compromises that will be necessary to resolve this conflict. But after a number of years of stagnation, there is now a serious negotiating process in train, and for all the difficulties, our view is that the international community needs in the months ahead to be ready to support both parties as they face up to the difficult but necessary compromises.